Campers, it's me, Ari Lehman, the first Jason Voorhees. From Friday the 13th, I'm here with AJ, and he's got the juiciest slice ready for you. It's dripping with blood. Jason never dies.
What makes a horror film kill memorable, terrific, even in some way profound or poignant? Let's explore. Thanks for checking this out. If anything about it trips your fancy, please like, subscribe, and share.
Oh, yes, yes.
Without further ado...
You're Julia, right?
That's right. Who are you?
I'm Frank.
This reminiscence is from the day that changed her life forever. In fact, it came on the eve of what should have been one of, if not the most important event of her life.
I came for the wedding.
Showing up as if out of nowhere, her fiancé's gallivanting brother was immediately a swarthy enigma, and she was a little struck by his handsome face and forthright demeanor.
Well, can I come in or not?
I'm sorry. Of course.
Nothing if not polite. They drank each other in.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Well, that's nice to know.
He surveyed her with the clinical detachment of a predator deciding if something was worth eating, and she loved his appraisal.
Do you have a towel?
Have you got a towel?
Yanked from her reverie by her husband's adult daughter.
Kirsty.
There's one in the bathroom.
It's back to reality, move-in day, into a family home fallen into decay, a place not very well suited to a woman of her haughty stature.
I thought half of it was your brother's.
I've never known him to kick cash out of bed.
What's worse, their first visit brought all this brother-in-law business back to the forefront of her mind.
Besides, he's probably behind bars someplace.
And it's become a preoccupation.
Frank.
He's here.
Oh, he's been here.
As magnanimous but maladroit Larry went exploring the house, insurmountable curiosity pushed Julia into exploring Frank's squatter's bed. Discovering photos her dirty digits couldn't help but rifle through. Photos full of Frank and his many concubines. Some of the images she made a point of keeping. The intrusion on her recollection won't do. In this moment, she's too raw to deal with others. So she slips away, where she can resume her trip down memory lane. And why?
What shall we drink to?
She and Frank have a history, albeit brief, and a sordid one. In Julia's estimate, it was too brief.
Wedded bliss?
I'm very happy.
Even if it's only a glimmer, some men can sense desperation, then exploit it, taking what might have been tiny and magnifying it into something grandiose.
I'm sure you are.
The hint of derisiveness lurking in his voice suggested he knew otherwise. He could read her that well. He knew instinctively what she really wanted, something his softy brother couldn't deliver.
You gonna let me kiss the bride?
Even if on some level a little flattered, where a faithful woman would be mortified, she was open to his advances. Instantly overfamiliar, he took liberties. Drawing her into the kind of intimacy that made her shuddery with desire. Before attacking her with the prowess of a wild beast. Had bunnies done the bunny dance without a second thought, that would be one thing. To blame on the whirlwind of passion.
What about Larry?
But to stop and ask about it, it returned a lot of culpability to her, because it showed she had her wits about her, and wasn't purely swept away.
Forget him.
even if Frank took the initiative by finessing her and propelling her excitement through the roof. With knife play and anticipation, titillating her in a way it seemed she had nary been titillated before. The way she relives this reveals how important it was. Not only did she absorb all the little details, she has turned them over in her mind, perhaps over and over, kept them alive, luxuriating in a one-off that redefined everything. There was a coy give and take, when it could have been stopped. Before she without question succumbed to his seduction. And all on the day before her wedding, too. Oh boy, that heightens the hotness even more. And doing it on her wedding dress? Talk about orgasmic bliss on an elevated level. Decorum can sucka. Well, point made. It would be fun explaining those wrinkles. This was all envisioned with more spanking and kink, but the ratings board, then and now, is populated by prudes. Julia learns that for her the absolute hottest, most fulfilling sex derives from illicitness, duplicity, and cuckoldry. The dupe who married her has one of those simple home accidents that, since the sight of blood makes him a real baby, might have killed him were he alone.
It's never enough.
Being his today when there's been 1,000 yesterdays, there's one thing not in doubt. Every today should fear tomorrow.
Julia.
She just wanted to try him on for size. It wasn't her fault he was the perfect fit.
I don't have time for these shenanigans.
Ready to shuck everything else if only she could be his. Probably fine being relegated to a mistress, so long as she belonged to him.
Please.
The rejection tore her up worse than Frank's, well, you get the picture. She was ready to compromise and debase herself, prepared to give up a part of herself.
I'll do anything you want.
Yet Julia's total submission wasn't enough.
Anything.
Because for Frank, no debauchery was ever enough. No one person could ever be either. Certainly not some woman who at her kinkiest would probably still be a brand of vanilla to a guy who needs a lot of sprinkles, fudge, and other toppings before even finding interest enough to indulge his sweet tooth, so to speak. Boffing his brother's wife likely the naughty and defiant aspect of the situation that got his rocks off, more so than any genuine interest in Julia. Snapping her out of the long ago time, those heady highs and lows, she needs to deal with her disillusioning hubby.
Is it deep?
No, I haven't looked.
There's definitely a spectrum to men. Without a second thought, John Rambo sewed up his wound. Larry Cotton would have laid down and died. Some high strangeness. It's as if the floorboards greedily absorb Larry's spillage.
There's more.
So true, and since Kirsty knows the most about the key Frank used to access other dimensions, I'll let her speak on it.
It was a puzzle box.
And the angelic demons, or demonic angels, that awaited him.
It was a gateway. Hell was what he wanted.
Otherworldly journeyers dealing pain and pleasure with equally dispassionate fervor.
And hell was what he got.
Making one thing clear, it would be no fun to be a jigsaw puzzle. The processing he experienced left a remnant of Frank like a smear, and he seemed to emulsify into the floorboards, leaving his essence, his very spirit trapped in the house like the ghost of a ghost, waiting for the right circumstances to return.
You know me and blood. I'm gonna faint.
You're not going to faint.
Period sex is off the table. Got it. They rush Larry to get stitches and, getting right to the heart of the matter, his corpuscles get up to more action than they ever did flowing through his veins. When they participate in a tango that reignites life, and Frank, in a very decimated form, is able to manifest out of the floor. It's no coincidence that spouting bodily fluid brings forth life. Inception usually involves a spurt, and birth always involves blood. If only all of life were so thrilling.
And what's my darling daughter drinking?
I don't remember.
A little home-warming dinner party underway, Julia's disillusionment shows. Larry and the life he provides are her burdens to bear, and they put her in a foul mood, especially when visions of Frank haunt her mind's eye. Isolation the only answer, she excuses herself.
I think I'm going to go to bed.
Are you alright, darling?
Drawn to that grubby room where all manner of bizarreness has transpired, she steps inside. And from her perspective is beset by a grotesque monstrosity. Snaking a path right toward her, probably making a pretty mucky snail trail. And maybe the most horrifying thing of all,
Julia?
it knows her name. This utterly outlandish, corpse-like scrambling entity knows her name.
Don't look at me.
Even the most gruesome sights can be transfixing, so I doubt she wants to look upon his disgusting visage.
Who are you?
I said, don't look.
It's maybe from a place of vanity that he can't immediately admit his identity. When he finally opens up,
Frank.
Julia's horror is multiplied tenfold, because suddenly the piteous creature mucking up the floor
No.
is the man she lusts for, the real object of her desire and infatuation.
Believe me. It's me. It's really me.
Having literally just wrenched himself out of the woodwork,
Just help me, will you?
little details don't mean much to him. I mean, he's probably operating on half-formed organs and just enough active nerves to remember pain.
Please, God, help me.
All that matters is crawling around without a skin.
You can't leave me like this, you can't.
Is the kind of dire straits that require aid to remedy.
Do you want me to do?
Proving Frank is more than metaphorically vampiric, there's one thing he needs.
The blood brought me this far. I need more.
Out of character for him, usually in control Frank oozes with desperation.
You have to heal me.
Evocative cut, suggesting Kirsty will be the one sacrificed for that purpose. Luckily for her, just a suggestion, though foreshadowing nonetheless. It's a dilemma. She has a lot of considerations to parse through. On the one hand, procuring blood would be a dirty business.
Anything?
On the other hand, there's restoring the only lover who made all her flags whip in the wind. Every single one of them.
Anything.
Meanwhile, Frank is in the other room wondering if his best girl will come through in the clutch. Or if he'll have to resort to rodents to fill out his bones. Luckily for him, there's a particular bone of his Julia desires over all else, with the benefit of having appealed to her lady parts.
Which are the lady parts?
The vagina and the heart.
As spine-chilling and reprehensible as his request,
You'll do it.
Yes.
Julia's all in. If you ever wanted to see the consequences when a woman goes from having a skeleton in her closet to a skeletal affair partner in the room next door, this is the film for you.
I will.
Even in his ruinous form, there must be a significant amount of iron in his penis, because her moral compass needle is hopping all over the place.
If we're both on our own, maybe we can have a drink together.
This covenant they've entered into requires Julia play siren to lure meals, and it's open season on traveling businessmen. Not having the foggiest, these freewheeling gents strut in, and when their backs are turned,
Did you lock this?
she mercifully stuns the schmucks prior to the feeding that, also mercifully, happens off screen. Think spider draining a weary box elderbug that through blunder and folly wound up in a web.
Jesus Christ.
But the results speak for themselves. Frank is practically a new man.
Every drop of blood you spill puts more flesh on my bones.
And as an astute observer, he knows exactly what motivates her.
And we both want that, don't we?
No fear of voicing what he wants. Frank is as demanding as ever.
Come here, damn you, I want to touch you.
Since a skinless man is still a horrendous sight, the personification of a raw nerve, Julia has reservations.
Come to daddy.
Handsiness, groping, those are just the facts of life. Repulsion and desire fight it out in a back alley, and Repulsion learns the meaning of defilement. They will need to stick a pin in it while Julia deals with clueless Larry. But don't worry, you won't be denied that suggested and suggestive imagery. In it deep because she wants it inside her deep, providing for Frank's restoration continues. All this murder might be a really twisted form of ongoing foreplay. They are definitely building to something, shown in the trust Frank extends.
This is it.
Let me
No,
see.
don't touch it. It's dangerous.
The phrase "don't touch it" not usually in his vernacular unless he's teasing. He cares enough to spare her getting too close to the quagmire he will forever have a foot in.
It opens doors.
What kind of doors?
But he needs her to know certain truths about his situation.
Doors to the pleasures of heaven or hell. I didn't care which.
Funny how that works. You don't care until it's too late.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Like living out a fantasy only to discover it's not as fun as you thought it would be until you're tied up in the fetal position with a ball gag in your mouth and the dominatrix is rolling a French tickler onto the strap-on, which I know nothing about from first-hand experience, but I know it's what safe words are for. The problem for Frank being that the Cenobites don't believe in safety of any kind, words or otherwise.
I'm going to live and you're going to help me, yes?
Yes.
Credit to a cad, he needs her to understand he will be a hunted man if knowledge of his continued existence gets out. His appeal grants him great favor. Julia is steadfast.
They'll never find us. Not in the whole wide world.
Those sound like famous last words. Not yet able to make it over the final hump of evil, After Julia uses seduction to distract Larry from falling into Frank's trap, the flayed chap demonstrates on a dead rat. What should be done with
Poor Larry,
for being,
obedient as ever.
and her pleas for him to be spared are mistaken for major confusion by her befuddled husband.
I just don't understand you.
Certain to masturbate somewhere alone while weeping, he collects up his blue balls and exits stage right. Setting off a domino effect, Kirsty happens upon Julia bringing home Frank's next meal. This is the epitome of this isn't what it looks like, but what it is so much worse. Frank has certainly regained his strength and vigor, able to overpower a man with ease.
Get out of here, please. Don't let him kill me.
But then maybe the guy is in such shock at the sight of him, he's lost all strength. Kirsty knows none of that, believing when she enters the house that she's seeking evidence of infidelity. When she comes upon Frank in the midst of assimilating another poor soul, and learns of her uncle's half-life.
This isn't happening.
Oh, but it is.
I used to tell myself that. I used to try and pretend I was dreaming all the pain, but don't you kid yourself.
Frank clearly harboring a yen for his niece.
Some things have to be endured.
Demonstrates his profound deviance, the kind of gross that inspires heebie-jeebies.
And that's what makes the pleasure so sweet.
What a weirdo. That is not how you talk to a family member. Kirsty, between being skeeved out and repulsed, has no trouble teaching him a lesson that all lacking full bodily integrity need to realize. If there's not enough protecting your vitals to prevent a hand from disemboweling you, you're at a major disadvantage. No, a groin shot never hurts either. What really pains him, though, what really puts him over the edge, is her frivolous disregard for his need to maintain access to his key to eternity.
What in fucking happened?
Snatching up the puzzle box as she flees, Frank and Julia are left in a sticky quandary.
She'll tell him everything.
The skinless man needs to walk a fine line.
I don't think so. She'll want to warn Larry first.
That's probably her now.
To persuade Julia to do what he requires of her.
Or the police.
It doesn't make any difference.
Kirsty's awareness does necessitate expediting their plans, which means Frank has a very particular need.
Don't you care?
What I care about is a new skin.
Julia feels cornered and she doesn't wear the stress of it well.
Maybe we should just leave.
Like this. Look at me.
With a bunch of rotting husks upstairs acting as maggot incubators, she's not wrong.
We can't just stay here.
But will she abide Frank's solution?
My brother will be home soon.
Larry's skin might be somewhat thin, and Julia's sick of looking at his face. But where there's convenience, there's compromise. Not to mention feelings of menace, doom, and defeat closing in are strong motivators. Kirsty makes the mistake of playing with the box, and has to give the Cenobites the uncomfortable news that Frank escaped their insidious clutches.
Supposing he had escaped us, what has that to do with you?
And uses it to bargain for her own soul. She offers the trade of Frank for herself.
Perhaps we prefer you.
At the possible cost of her very soul, Pinhead has one requirement.
I want to hear him confess himself. Then, maybe...
Some maybes are just ominous.
Maybe...
There's one problem. With his skin, Frank has assumed Larry's identity. Kirsty is thrown for a loop at the revelation, and allows him to get too close.
Frank!
How well stolen skin would heal is up for debate, so he's none too pleased. Ready to tie up loose ends if she's so unwilling to participate in his diversionary farce of an existence.
So much for the cat and mouse shit.
Julia shows she fits the bill of wicked stepmother by holding Kirsty in place so Frank can stab her real good. No wilting Violet too frightened to fight back. In the last instant, she proves adequately evasive. How this plays out reveals the truth of how little he cares, how she's meaningless. Frank would be the type to expect total devotion without offering even a scintilla of loyalty in return.
It's nothing personal, babe.
To think it was Julia's deep desire to drain him of seminal fluids, and in the end he drains her of life essence. The final penetration he'll give her, he withdraws the blade.
Where are you, beautiful?
This is a lesson that some men, no matter how sweet their words, how good their loving, are perpetual takers. Deviance quotient through the roof. Big ew. It takes all of 30 seconds before he's ready to move on to a family member.
Frank's here. Bastard! Your dear old Uncle Frank.
That was all the Cenobites needed to hear to return for the fool who blew his chance to escape, because he couldn't fight the urge to covet his niece. Game over. Frank gambled everything and came up snake eyes due to his own hubris.
You set me up, bitch!
Frank returns to the Cenobites' bondage, relegated to a personal hell where gratification is unachievable, and Kirsty, looking to avoid ending up in hell herself, is forced to pry the puzzle box from Julia's cold dead hands. This allows her to revoke the Cenobites' invitation to the earthly realm.
No, don't do that!
Go to hell!
And all's well that ends well. Julia is dead and devoured, hoisted by her own petard, a corpse on a mattress.
You've got to destroy that mattress.
I mean, yeah, it would have no resale value. I doubt even a college kid would want to throw a tarp over it.
See, Julia died on it, and she can come back now like Frank.
That makes perfect sense. It can't be denied.
Life and death are a seamless continuum.
And since the top loony in the loony bin where Kirsty finds herself, Dr. Chernard, a real nard if there ever was one, is in charge, and he knows all about portals to other dimensions, at least academically, he takes the steps necessary to facilitate Julia's return.
Get them off me!
Until absolutely necessary, the doc isn't one to get his hands dirty, so relies on self-mutilation to garner the needed blood, providing a sacrificial lamb in the form of a patient named Browning. Suffering from delusional parasitosis, it doesn't take much prompting before he's doing everything he can to purge himself of imagined creepy crawlies, and soon Julia is swimming out of a pool of gruesomeness like a giant water bug feeding on a goldfish. It would seem vanity survives death, and Julia's current makeup displeases her. It could be as much because now she's the vulnerable one, in need of help from another, all because the lover she would do anything for, even become a proficient serial killer, betrayed her without a second thought.
I'm cold.
What an understatement. No, wait, she was being literal. Stands to reason, she has no skin. Evidently raw meat and Invisible Man rapping are Dr. Chernard's jam. Julia knows how to seal the deal, and since to accomplish what she wants, she kind of needs a subservient worshipper under her dominion, she shows him the wild side of her world. And he provides better than a dozen warm bodies for her to absorb. Restoring her as we knew her before. Kirsty and Dr. Chernard's assistant physician go to the good doctor's house to get to the bottom of things.
Sorry I started you.
No longer a hideous thing, she has dynamism and sex appeal working for her again.
I had to stop you going in there because I knew you'd cry out.
So he doesn't think for a second the attractive lady before him is the very definition of a monster.
Is it still here?
The it he's referring to, of course, was skinless Julia.
I don't know.
So she easily manipulates him into a position from which she can pounce and enjoy a nice snack as if he were a tasty bonbon. She doesn't exactly need to absorb him, but Kirsty can't have a love interest. The Cotton Brothers' two best girls reunite in Julia's convalescent den of horrors.
Kirsty, you have surprisingly good taste in men.
At this point, it becomes apparent she owns her malevolence.
They changed the rules of the fairy tale. I'm no longer just the wicked stepmother.
Reveling in her power to terrorize and cast down those she deems beneath her.
Now I'm the evil queen. So come on.
Enticing Kirsty to come at her so she can counter.
Take your best shot, Snow White.
With Kirsty dispensed with, she was maybe a little too ramped up. It's time to open the gates to the other side. How do Dr. Chernard and Julia accomplish this? By using a traumatized savant from the institution, of course. Can't have the exploitation slow down when he has such a ready supply of sacrifices. I'm sure this will be met with consent.
No.
Evidently, this isn't a task that can be outsourced.
It is not hands that call us.
The required personal touch not able to be bestowed by an outside party.
It is desire.
Kirsty awakes to find she has access to the labyrinth, and because she has it on fairly good authority that her father could possibly be in hell, she takes the opportunity to poke around, which means a run-in with the Cenobites.
I didn't open the box!
Didn't open the box.
They think she doth protest too much.
And what was it last time? Didn't know what the box was.
They are certain she harbors the desire to play with them, even though she claims she has no such desire whatsoever.
And yet we do keep finding each other, don't we?
But since she keeps ending up there, you really can't blame them.
So eager to play. So reluctant to admit it.
Whatever flicker of uninhibited abandon they recognize inside Kirsty seems to make her a particular interest, as if they see a stone they can grind and polish into a stunning gem, and they want to see all her facets gleam.
Perhaps you're teasing us. Are you teasing us?
If you're going to show up to the orgy, you have to participate. But Kirsty won't be deterred from her purpose for entering this terrifying but eerily majestic realm.
I've come for my father!
The Cenobites' derision is palpable. They know her journey might be one of righteousness, but ultimately it is one of futility too.
Feel free. Explore.
The gash of sadomasochistic shredders of flesh is nothing if not generous, giving free rein to explore hell and all.
I have such sights to show you.
All of this is really just a distraction while Julia takes the good doctor to see the god of the underworld, because they really need to meet. At this point, all men are tools, and if Dr. Chernard believes she actually cares, he's a bloated fool besides, and will soon be turned into a court jester, although a powerful one, at least for a time. But he will prove too much a fool to have power for long.
Oh, God.
Dr. Chernard gets more than he bargained for, and Julia gets exactly what she wants.
This is mine.
Return to the bosom of the very entity she knows has bestowed her with her current status in the cosmos and beyond.
The god that sent me back.
It's not groveling when she exudes adulation.
The god I serve in this world and yours.
It's true adoration. That Julia knows her place and still serves a higher power really says something, considering she herself is now a supernatural entity who has cheated death.
The god of flesh, hunger, and desire.
So the god of everything important, I guess. Well, if she had thrown commerce in there.
My god. Leviathan.
She's practically a cheerleader or a press agent or something.
Lord of the Labyrinth.
You sort of have to wonder what went on while Julia was consigned to this place. What kind of strange events might have transpired after what got her here in the first place? Dr. Chernard seems to be judged for all his Nazi-esque medical experimentation. Stuff that definitely appears like torture when viewed by those outside the dispassionate medical world. Once judged, he's basically been blanched like a plum dropped into boiling water.
This is what you wanted to see. This is what you wanted to know.
No longer a puppet, but the unquestioned puppeteer.
And here it is.
Julia talks to him low-key mockingly, as if she knew he probably couldn't handle all that this is, because it's a lot. Ah yes, the weakness of the flesh, and what aberration!
Help me!
Making love to a woman without a stitch of skin except where it counts. The power of her sexual magnetism accomplished exactly what she hoped for.
Why do you think I was allowed to come back?
If she were sent back, that would suggest Dr. Chernard was a pawn the whole time.
It wanted souls. And I brought you.
Manipulated to resurrect Julia, and end up himself in the labyrinth.
And you wanted to know.
Punished for his curiosity, and the ends he used to get there.
Now you know.
Because when the fetish is actually fulfilled, it might not be nearly as satisfying as hoped.
Now everybody's happy.
And your rear end might be a little sore afterwards. Again, no knowledge from personal experience. The good doctor is maybe a little overwhelmed when faced with true evil.
Goodbye, Doctor.
And his terror and trepidation before the god he was so desperate to see, meet, and know. Seals his fate. The good authority on which Kirsty based her decision to go ahead and enter hell turns out to be Frank's trickery, because that unhealthy interest he has in her has only grown as he's been denied all gratification in his personal hell.
So ripe in your confusion, so luscious in your pain.
Rather than submit to his violent wishes, Kirsty has other ideas.
I'd rather burn.
It's a slice of torment, but it's his slice of torment. The burning again robs Frank of his skin. Just in time to be reunited with Julia.
I knew you'd come.
You knew?
In the short time they've been apart since the fiasco at the house.
You're a girl who always keeps her promises.
Oh, I do.
Julia has evolved magnitudes and come into herself.
I do.
Since no one else, at least no one she really wanted, was coming in her.
I know just how much I mean to you.
But it seems Frank isn't perceptive enough to know that unlike him, she was purified in hell's flames, her evil tempered into a material that would shatter steel, and whatever hold he once had over her,
Come here. Kiss me.
was dissolved like a broken contract, so he's oblivious to the fact that the only thing typifying her now is an attitude nastier than any sex he could offer her.
And then we'll have a real family reunion.
What a maroon! He's under the misimpression he's the one in charge.
Come here.
That he can order her around, force her to do his bidding.
You belong to me.
Way overestimating his place in her existence, he has no idea what he's invited. Only for Julia to return the favor of breaking her heart by tearing out his.
Nothing personal.
Mentioning heartbreak, elsewhere the final stage in Dr. Channard's metamorphosis involves stirring his noodle with a Cuisinart blade. On the run in an almost inescapable situation, Kirsty and her young ward are directionally disadvantaged in the worst way.
Which way, Tiffany?
A confusing smorgasbord of indefinable chutes and avenues, a sucking vortex opening up as if out of nowhere, is par for the course.
You never could hold on to anything for very long. Could you, Kirsty?
Even in a maze without a minotaur, that doesn't mean plenty of other monsters aren't lurking about, and Julia might be the most monstrous of all. Thoroughly fed up with her father's widow, Kirsty is willing to give every effort. The young savant seemingly recognizes a chance to facilitate Julia's quick exit. And in an instant, Julia is shed of her skin and sucked into a bright vacuum to realms unknown. Well, if that wasn't a time to leave well enough alone. But she wanted Kirsty to suffer. More hubris in action.
She's such a bitch.
The whole escapade happened with so little fanfare. It almost seems like it couldn't possibly be Julia's end, her ultimate undoing, the final nail in her coffin. So it remains to be seen if she will remain vanished. Of course, with Kirsty running off to God knows where, Julia returns, ready to assist in Tiffany's vivisection at the hands of the Channard Cenobite. Julia is nothing if not consistent. There's such frisson between them, they don't even need to exchange words. The Channard Cenobite lost in a lip lock, Tiffany uses the distraction to solve the puzzle box in reverse. Fail! Done in by prurience and lust. Now I'm seeing a theme. The Channard Cenobite failed to realize where his jester duties ended. That succumbing to the weakness of the flesh was no way to curry favor from a god that prized precision and efficiency. And he's undone very similarly to a victim of drawing and quartering. Overwhelmed by all the grotesque imagery, the horrors of it all, Tiffany stumbles. Julia approaches, but it's not to gloat and stomp on her fingers.
Trust me.
A last-minute redemption arc for the evil queen, reversing all that bad karma she accrued through infidelity, murder, and serving Leviathan? Would she really be willing to sacrifice her skin to save Tiffany? Julia? Not a chance. Having donned Julia's skin like a particularly vulgar bodysuit, Kirsty pulled off the ultimate sleight of hand, assuming her wicked stepmother's identity. So in the end, Kirsty made a fool of Julia by using her casing to make a fool of the soul she personally vetted and introduced to Leviathan. Wherever Julia ended up, it's safe to assume she's gone forever, trapped in some personal hell from which she never escaped. And that's series canon.
Nobody escapes us.
Julia's double whammy exit meets the criteria of extraordinary for a number of reasons, but most of all because she was one badass bitch, and both of her comeuppances were not only deserved, but fitting. The betrayer betrayed, the monster outmaneuvered, the consequences of living morally fast and loose. Hers was ultimately a villain's arc, from essentially normal person to a monster perverted by desire into the personification of evil, enticed by a man whose hedonism wasn't only infectious, but catchier than your more virulent STDs.
There's nothing to be afraid of.
But Frank was wrong. Communicable diseases aside, the reality of these films made it very clear that damnation was a very real possibility. Even knowing as much, knowing her immortal soul was on the line, Julia courted damnation through the most abhorrent and dastardly behavior, and perhaps a lesson that evil only begets evil.
What?
Was betrayed for her service to darkness, first by Frank, who could discard her like an empty sugar packet, then her god, who granted her no salvation even after recognizing her utter fearlessness as a quality applicable to its godly machinations. And she did it all for her own satisfaction, or lack thereof, beginning with the need to fill a hole, pun very much intended, a strong enough motivator to shuck moral norms, and go full fiend.
One more, maybe two.
Not
To
again.
heal me completely.
We were blessed to get a sequel that allowed us to witness her metastasization into a full-blown demon, traipsing around hell. But it all began with Julia's unmet sexual needs.
It's just terrible.
A great story connected to the first film was that everyone involved with the production were brainstorming ideas for a title that didn't have the word hell in it, when a woman of prim and proper disposition suggested what a woman would do for a good fuck. Kirsty might have been the final girl because the era demanded it, but Julia was the real star, her desire the driving force.
Why not?
Julia had to make the decision to help Frank, and I think there was more to it than just the overweening desire to relive the act for which she yearned. A bit desolate, a little dead inside, and bound in a dull, prosaic domestic limbo, the fulfillment she felt certain he could provide would have been a counterbalance to all the disappointment in her life.
You promised me an explanation.
Some women are willing to give up a lot for security. It's very possible Julia was willing to give up a measure of happiness for it, until Frank opened her eyes to the greater pleasures of life. When he left, she had to settle for her own tedious rut, her own slice of hell. Whatever propriety, character flaw, and or materialism that led her to marry Larry, even after cheating on him and figuring out they weren't a great match, destroyed her chance at happiness too.
I suppose it's better than Brooklyn.
Based on her Arctic demeanor, it would seem doubtful going through with the wedding was to spare Larry. No, she wasn't about to lose her prize, the emotional doormat she could continuously wipe her bitchy boots on.
Oh, yes!
Not quite the provider she wanted, nor the tenacious lover for which she yearned. Basically a wet rag with which she had sidled herself. There was value in his subservience, but the lack of thrills and passion he inspired left her feeling hollowed out in a way she was certain only Frank, with his uninhibited screwing, could fill in. Unmistakably a lady with spendy tastes, moving into that run-down old family home had to be like a slap in the face.
Ugh, smells damp.
The kind of disenchantment that, in regard to Larry anyway, made her drier than the sands of the Sahara. Then to find evidence of Frank. The only man who could really free her in the most important ways, had to be like a kick in the gut. It seems very likely the photo she spirited away would have been a party to a lot of bean flicking, had he not emerged from the floor.
Oh, Lord.
Decadent debaucher Frank didn't just unlock Julia's prurient side, he opened the door to her shadow self, the demon that caroused in her id, hidden under layers and layers of civilization and decorum and respectful society, the thing that exists in us all, and gave mankind a step up in the survival of the fittest battle, and we do everything to deny in the modern world, because no one wants to think about how everything we have is steeped in blood.
Blasphemer!
A peek into her inner unknown showed a gallery of terrors, a freak show she would have never known existed without Frank's coaxing.
Come here.
From a normal woman to a receptacle of pure evil, and not just when Frank was filling her up. On some level she was never really a good person, but that might have never been released. Her submerged baddie, the part of her that allowed her to sink to the darkest and deepest depths of absolute human depravity, without the proper triggering. It makes you wonder how many monsters are walking around, living regular lives, unaware they're monsters until the right precipitator comes along.
I'm Brother Frank.
It's easy to come back to the notion of a personal Pandora's box, because it's like once that's opened, a person can entirely change, learning who they truly are based on the desires that drive them. Julia was obviously ruled by some fairly vanilla perversity, but perversity nonetheless, because she was willing to take as many lives as necessary to have her desires met. Yet it seems unlikely in the long run, even at her freakiest, she could have kept up with Frank's degeneracy and escalating kinkiness, so she was always destined to lose him, despite all her sacrifices on his behalf.
Don't want Babe to hear.
You're hurting.
If, like the Cenobites, the shadow self is good or evil based on application, that would suggest that nature and nurture aside, at her core, for whatever reason, when stripped to the basics, Julia was always not just a run-of-the-mill bad person, but essentially truly evil. I wonder how bad the post-orgasm clarity would have been had her desires come to fruition. Would she have regretted her turn? Or would she have accepted the results were worth the means? Invariably the latter, for her fall, when she was plummeting, was all the way to the very bottom, and the climb out of that pit would have taken a lengthy prison sentence and conversion to Christianity, at least for sake of impressing the appeals board.
Is it terrible?
Sensation seeker and afterlife voyager Frank's debt of gratitude to Julia should have been immeasurable, but for him to recognize that would have required him to care about others outside himself.
Oh, don't be shy, beautiful. Ghosts aren't jealous.
Once resurrected, how lost would he have been without her to fall back on? A pitiful, wretched, skinless thing, downgraded to skulking around a filthy upstairs room. No, wait, he was doing that before the Cenobites left him in pieces.
Call it overzealousness.
The guy's life of addictive behavior certainly brought him no place good. How many rats and other small creatures would it have taken before he had enough meat on his bones to risk going out in the world to procure a victim to absorb?
Help me!
Maybe he would have lucked into a transient, a runaway, a drug addict looking for a place to get lit. Short of that, it would have been slim pickings for some time. Julia made it so he had a much better chance of surviving and shirking the Cenobites. And yet, despite her allegiance, the second she outlived her usefulness to him, he made her the giving tree, and took the last of her, nor so he thought. That he did her that dirty, and not in the good way, was low down. Down low. It was bad. And her revenge on him was sweet and well-deserved, and very personal. Julia seemingly lived a clean life until Frank revealed to her just what a dirty girl she really was. And from there she just got filthier and filthier. A suggestion that when you get a little sullied, you have to be careful, because it can be only a matter of time until you're totally caked in dirt, nor other things. In the end, the good she imagined in her scandalous lover wasn't to view through rose-tinted glasses, so much as a fantasy mirage she saw off in the middle distance of her flight of fancy. A dissatisfied woman's growing magnification and exaggeration of a steamy and forbidden liaison with a selfish but scrumptious man, who made her into a piece of meat he tenderized with a lot of pounding. To extend the analogy, she loved getting smashed into whatever shape he wanted to leave her fillets, never imagining because of him she would one day literally be a meat person, walking around without a skin. I guess such a nasty happenstance isn't exactly foreseeable. Even after absorbing Julia's life essence, because he foisted Larry's epidermis, the skin Frank wore was ill-fitting and not completely attached to his flesh.
Jesus wept.
Whereas Julia, after sucking up a whole lot more poor souls, was able to regenerate her skin and therefore her identity. However, her pelt seemed no more affixed than Frank's, despite manifesting the coating out of her body. Logistically, of course it was so that she could get sucked into the vortex while her skin remained behind for Kirsty to utilize. But maybe there was a reason that came out of the story for why her skin would act like a sheath that could be stripped off like a snake's shed. Perhaps it indicated her allure was only skin deep. Then under her attractive wrapping was a package not conducive to life. So much so it couldn't hold on to her own skin.
Yep, that stands up to scrutiny.
For a time, Julia really wanted Frank to be her Valentine, but when it wasn't to be, she moved on to maybe the most important love of all. The sin extravaganza that plays out between the two films might be propping up the ultimate love story, that of a conniving woman falling in love with her own rotten core. That part of her that made it possible to cheat on her husband with his brother before they were even married, feasible to kill strangers as if their lives meant nothing compared to her having even some fleeting pleasure, flay her husband, and stand before the wrath of a god without fear. Julia was really a piece of work, unable to control her own darkest yearnings, because she wouldn't let anything stand in the way of what she desired. No human life meant more than her pleasure, which is a very dark stance to take, a psychopathic one, befitting an evil queen right out of the darkest, most sinister fairy tale. And as the Grimm brothers love to showcase to their readers, in fairy tales, for every happily ever after, a villain or villainess gets their oftentimes brutal and ironic just desserts. Pulled into an abyss of blinding light so bright it assimilated her darkness, Julia's malefic ruler got hers. Maybe the horniest one of all, but certainly not the fairest. Well, I've about reached the end of the rope, so I won't leave you dangling. Thanks for humoring my ramblings. Please share any refutations, opinions, accusations, japes, or other ideas in the comments below. And please join me for whatever I'm up to next time. Bye now!
Keep it creepy!
He's a weird guy.
Goodbye!